The prediction markets industry is storming its way from relative obscurity to becoming one of the fastest growing and most controversial global businesses in the digital age. From Main Street to Wall Street, firms like Polymarket and Kalshi are rewriting how we think about research, policymaking, economic forecasting, and even gambling. Well, joining me is our Atlanta source for all things cryptocurrency and more. You know him very well. That is NYU professor and Rubicon Digital Assets CEO, Greg Johnson. Joining us to talk about all this, Greg, it's so great to be with you as always. What exactly are prediction market companies and why are they so controversial?
I'll tell you what, Faith, that with that opening you just gave me, it is everything else we're going to talk about today. My goodness. But listen, it's always good to be with you. And as a matter of fact, the prediction markets industry is one of the fastest growing sectors in financial services. It is one of the most controversial sectors. And as you pointed out, it's touching literally every facet of daily life. You know, simply put, prediction market companies like Kalshi, like Polymarkets, even one that's controversial right now here in the state of Georgia, Fanatics Markets. These are companies that allow users to trade on the outcomes of real-life events that range from sports, the economy, the Federal Reserve appointments, the weather, whether or not the gold medal count was going to be at 13. If you can think of it, you can wager on these markets. And so you can imagine that this has opened up a can of worms, whether or not it's from ethics to regulatory, to some of the concerns that people have about trends with gambling and addiction here in the United States. It's really got everything in this stew coming from the prediction market industry. Now look, critics view the industry as nothing more than unregulated gambling. And that's because they have found a way with this regulated prediction market business, regulated federally by the CFTC, we'll come to that later, I'm sure, but they found a way to basically allow people to wager on sports events, but to do it in a way that legally circumvents what many states have put into play. What's also interesting is as many critics there are, Faith, of this industry, there are some surprising kind of, I don't want to say supporters, but people that have said we're interested in learning more. So for example, the Federal Reserve Bank, yes, that Federal Reserve Bank in Washington and the branch we have here in Atlanta, our Federal Reserve Bank has basically said, we've commissioned a study, and you know what? These prediction markets, seeing how people think about the outcomes of future events, is actually providing data and research and analysis that's more accurate than some of the traditional sources. And I think that's what's got everybody so confounded, is something that, quite frankly, 5 years ago people were laughing at, and today the Federal Reserve is taking very seriously.
Now, Greg, let me ask you this. Given some of the controversy that you just explained there and these concerns about illegal gambling, how are lawmakers approaching these new platforms?
Well, one of the first thing you have to start first and foremost is that the markets themselves, whether they're commodities or securities, are regulated at a federal level. In this case, it's the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. It's also the first regulator that started the process of figuring out how do we regulate Bitcoin and these cryptocurrency issues. We're not going to talk about that today. What we are going to say is that the CFTC said, well, we're going to take this new prediction markets business, we're going to license it. But everything came to a head with the company you mentioned before, Kalshi, back during the previous election cycle, when the CFTC said, hey, wait a second, you can't make markets on the outcome of these elections. That might cause undue or untoward influence on the outcome of American elections. And the company fought it, and they actually won. And so right now, if you want, you can take a look and say, well, who do you think is going to win the next presidential election? By the way, if you think it's going to be J.D. Vance or if it's going to be Gavin Newsom, right now Kalshi shows that more people think it's actually J.D. Vance winning that presidential election. So the problem is, though, is that individual states are saying, hey, wait a second, we care about our own citizenry. We don't like the fact that youngsters are potentially having the ability to wager like this. We don't like the fact that we don't have legal sports gambling in our state like Georgia. And we're concerned that this is circumventing what we as a state have decided. So we're not done by any stretch with this topic. And I think more and more of our viewers are going to be paying attention to these predictive markets more than they ever would have thought.
And you know what, Greg, on a separate topic, can you share any timely updates to the digital assets industry and this recent price struggle with Bitcoin, something that we've talked about on here before?
Price struggle is putting it mildly, Faith. There was a window a year ago. We were covering this market, and the Trump election and so on and so forth, and we saw the record highs at over 124,000 for Bitcoin. And as you know, or many people know, it's now struggling to stay above 60. I think all of this economic uncertainty, all of the tariff battles that we've been hearing about, all of the threats of war and conflict have taken a toll on the industry. And by the way, some of the regulatory progress hasn't finished settling in yet. So we still have some time to go. And I think for those of you that are listening and you hold Bitcoin or you have it in your portfolio, in your retirement and so forth, just be prepared for volatility for the long run. I think the real headline just broke this morning, though, Faith, that's worth mentioning here. Many people would be surprised that the company known as Meta, which was originally Facebook, actually has more to do with the current $1 trillion, what people believe is a $1 trillion stablecoin industry, a subject we've covered for a long time here together. Actually, the pioneer of the stablecoin industry was Meta. Meta saw early, or Facebook at the time, saw early the power of having its own currency as a company, given its global footprint, the exchange of value between countries, doing it economically. But because Facebook ran afoul with Cambridge Analytica scandal during the 2016 election cycle, there we go with elections again, they were not allowed to develop their stablecoin. And it took a few more years for others like Circle or Tether to come into prominence. Well, we now know that because of all of the regulatory changes in DC, with all these new companies now signing up saying, we want to be a bank, we want to be a bank, Meta is saying, we're going to come back in and try a different angle so that they can lay their claim to this stablecoin industry, this $1 trillion industry. So it's never slow in these markets.
It's never slow. It is all connected. Greg Johnson, the CEO of Rubicon Digital Assets, thank you so much for breaking that down for us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Faith.
Thank you.